All right, this is part two of our discussion about Palestine and Israel's war against Gaza and its citizens and its people. So yeah, we were talking about various things that you can do, and also just some kind of fascist tendencies, but also fascist tendencies of Israel, but also just kind of how this the movement in Palestine has helped a lot of the world realize how much we're against genocide and not wanting this to happen again, which we didn't expect it to come for the Israelis being fascist, or at least I didn't. But like it's a strange series of events. But yeah, do you want to go ahead and take it off?
Yeah, I mean, it gives me some strange, fray of, I don't even want to say hope. I want to say, an opportunity, for us globally to really assess where our leaders are taking us. I think a lot of us are completely dissatisfied with this and I think the suffering that's in the United States, for example, in terms of class tension and resources, is being felt in other countries as well. And so we are seeing sort of the Palestinians at this end of a rope we feel we're on. In a way, I feel like a lot of us, it's not just sympathy. I think it's also empathy for their situation, including people who are, descendants of Holocaust survivors. I think I have this hope for a global, never before have I ever seen a global movement quite like this. And I think in part because of the internet, because of the information that has spread so fast. Yes, propaganda can spread that fast, but our information can spread faster. Our truth can spread faster. And if we keep spreading it faster than the propaganda, which has to be manufactured and tailored and they're so bad at it, as we were saying before a little bit, off recording, that I've had reflections on when I learned about the Holocaust as a child and how we were taught, oh, it was sophisticated, systemic, brainwashing. But I really think it's just time. I think it's time and repetition, because most people viewing Israeli propaganda against Palestinians are not fooled by it. It's very
So obvious. Yeah.
just hateful and backwards. And I remember one lady, I don't know how much she was paid to do this. It'd be embarrassing if she did it for free, but she was making a little TikTok in her car, an Israeli woman, lots of lip filler, all that. And she's oh, fake crying, my grandma survived the gas chambers. I was like, that's weird, because nobody survived the gas chambers. And you're a little young for your grandma to have been involved in the Holocaust. Was your grandma an infant, that somehow survived gas chambers? Or do you mean the camps? Did you even fucking read about this? You care so little about Holocaust survivors and people who died in the Holocaust, and yet you're weaponizing this to kill people in the same way, systematically, by putting them in what you're calling an open air prison. I'm sorry, Palestinians are not criminals. What prison are you talking about? They're not criminals. They haven't done crimes. These are children, or grandmas or whatever. I remember just bawling my eyes out seeing this, again, this was at least a few decades ago, of these old women. Anyone who wants to paint Palestine as this super misogynistic Sharia law place is embedded in Islamophobia, because it's just not the case. A lot of these political parties they had were led by women, and it was these old women and little girls throwing rocks at tanks, throwing rocks at these tanks that were just shooting at them.
Some of those women have been kept in prison for years and years and years without trial, without any kind of legal rights. So there's this, when we think of hostages that Hamas took, right? We think about the 149. There's been thousands of Palestinians that the Israelis have kept for years that are children, small, girls, teenage boys, old women, old men, kept for years and years and years and years and years. And what I noticed on kind of Al Jazeera, which has, a good Palestinian perspective on this, is that, they're talking about Palestinians getting their hostages back. And, when we think about, however many hostages that, 200 that Israel took, but not Israel took, that Hamas took, Israel has over 5,000 Palestinians that have been kept for years. And it's just, they're not considered as hostages because, once again, the messaging and the framing of this has been completely stilted and completely looked at the angle that you can say the West or, the United States and its allies want to push, which is unfortunate. But also, getting at fascism. Fascism is so like I hear there's a whole lot of false information on the History Channel about how smart Hitler and the people around him were. They were not intelligent. They
No,
actually,
really, no.
if you really study the Holocaust, like they didn't have it really planned out when they were taking Jews, and they're just like, they're like, okay, I guess we'll put them in camps, and they had this plan to ship them to Madagascar and leave them on an island, but they didn't come. But then they were like, oh well, we can't get them all by ship, so they were trying to figure out what they're gonna do, and then they just kind of slapped together this thing to kind of get rid of them. But the reason that I bring that up, and because fascism and nationalism is pretty dumb, and it's really knee jerk. It's not long term thinking. I don't think Israel's thinking about. I don't think that they're thinking about this long term, and I feel like a lot of that stupid knee jerk reaction of just trying to get rid of them without having a plan is happening to the Palestinians right now. To where it's like, you want them to go, so you're telling the civilians to go somewhere, to go away from Hamas tunnels. Apparently they're everywhere. But like, where do you want the civilians to go? Like, we don't know. We're not going to tell them anywhere to go. First it was South Gaza. Now, they're bombing South Gaza. Now there's nowhere to go. So they don't, fascism and nationalism, and we're seeing it in like hyper focus, kind of like how during the French Revolution, like they just went through all the phases of revolution and empire like really quickly. So we're seeing the phases of fascism in Israel like happen like really quickly, and we're seeing the stupidity of it. But I don't think people are really completely seeing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make a quick comment about what I've seen of hostages both ways, right? I remember a Palestinian boy who was held in, let's call it IDF custody, released, and the entire side of his head was imploded. He was alive, he was able to talk, but he had this severe dent in his skull that was just shocking to look at. He'd turn and it looked like half his head was missing. It was a good quarter chunk of his head missing. And yet you see these people released by Hamas, and I remember the media trying to silence this woman. They were like really ready, like, she's going to tell us how they raped her and stuff. And she was like, oh no, they made sure I had food and water, and they were fairly kind to me and told me that they weren't going to harm me. And and you'll see like, then they release more Israeli hostages and they're giving high fives in the fucking van. Bye bye, add me on Instagram. Like, it's a completely different experience than these people. If the Palestinians come out alive, they come out completely maimed and damaged. And
reports of sexual assault against women were in the jails and things like that. Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, and like, I just, even the narrative around Hamas rapes these people and stuff is again leans into this racist tendencies of these barbaric Arabs did this. And I even want to lean away from the word Islamophobia from now on, because I feel like most of the time when people say Islamophobia, what we actually should admit is that it's racism. It is racism specifically against Arabs, because like 90% of the time it has nothing to do with Islam and everything to do with Arabs. And correlating Islam with Arabs. And because this isn't about religion, this is about Palestinians. Like, this is about people with a particular ethnicity being attacked by Western occupation, being over and over again, like, systematically eliminated, systematically silenced, systematically destroyed out of history, out of existence.
And that's why South Africa brought those charges of genocide against Israel, is because the reason South Africa has had such a close relation to Palestine is it's not because of Islam. It's because Palestinians have been going through their own version of apartheid for decades and decades. And then South Africa, Africans having gone through that, they felt this like kinship with them. And they're pushing for those genocide charges and, in the International Criminal Court. Because they know what genocide looks like, and that's what it looks like, and it's just genocide by another name. So you see this kinship with South Africa, you see this kinship with other people who have gone through genocide, and I think some of those connections are the historical context and connections that we needed to see. There's no like good side to this, but one thing that will come out of it is that history might start making links for people that it did not before, if that makes sense.
And speaking of being on the right side of history, I do want to plug some things that we can do that are not asking too much of us. because I think like it's very overwhelming for a lot of people, and it's very like, well, what do I do? And I can't possibly do anything, or I'm powerless against this. But there are small things we can do at least to slow down the production of, IDF aggression, to slow, to aid the people in Gaza and to aid the people who are able to get aid to people in Gaza, people in the West Bank. So one of the things that I really like is buying eSIMs. This is something that you can do for people who have had no internet, had no way of contacting the outside world, contacting their family who may be in the United States or in the UK or wherever they are. So buying eSIMs, there's a particular website. I'm going to have a link in my video description. I can send it to you as well, where you can buy eSIMs and send it to the proper email. There are fully automated things to contact your representatives if you're someone like me who has anxiety on the phone. I love to email Elizabeth Warren, though. I like to give her a piece of my fucking mind. So I do like the emails personally, but if you like the calls, there are some that are like automated. There are lists of appropriate boycotts that are on particular websites about different products that you would be surprised how many products give money directly to Israel and have been for decades. And it's kind of weird because most other things that produce stuff to us would tell us what country they're from, almost like they're hiding something. And so almost like they're hiding where that money is going to in Israel.
Military industrial complex.
Also, Hervabi, who, if anyone's interested in wearing a keffiyeh, I haven't really talked about keffiyehs in this discussion, but if you'll recognize it by being the fishnet patterned scarf that you'll see a lot of people in this movement wearing. There's a significance for it. The fishnets represent the fishermen. The borders represent like the olive branches that grow native to Palestine, and it's a symbol of solidarity. There's nothing to do with Islam. It's a perfectly secular symbol of solidarity against occupation. So if you want to buy a keffiyeh, I recommend going to Hervabi. I'll have that website. It's the only remaining factory in Palestine, so making keffiyehs worldwide. They just get such a high demand that they often get they shut down to produce more, and then so like when they are next available to order, I would highly suggest buying from them instead of some Chinese company that may be funding Israel. So, you may want to just look into that. That's another way to show your support and also send some money to an authentic factory in Israel. Boycotting is always free. There's even video games now, I believe, that you can, like little games on your phone you can play that donate money to Palestinian aid. So it costs nothing to do. You just play a little watermelon game. I haven't been able to track down the exact name of it, but I've saved it on my Instagram reel, so I'll find it again. But there's so many ways in which we can help, and even just staying in tune with what Al Jazeera has been reporting is a good way of doing that. Following those who wear press vests and, just amplifying their voices. I've been following even translators of Arabic, to fully understand so that we cannot be deceived about what these people are saying when they are speaking on their story, when they are sharing what's going on, to not have them be mistranslated and misrepresented. So there's so many things that we can do, and I want to urge anyone, like, whatever you're comfortable starting with, start there. Even if it's just sharing or educating yourself right now, that is something. Start somewhere. You don't want to look back on this and feel like you've done nothing. You don't have to do everything. This is a collective effort. This is a global effort. No one has to be the hero. We're just here to support those who can do something and put our money and our efforts towards, moving away from violence, even if it's just preaching ceasefire now, or attending a local protest if you're able to, or just even coming up to someone who is visibly Muslim and being polite to them and being kind to them does go a long way with changing the culture war aspect of this, which is a huge factor.
Every little bit helps. And, when people do research the history or learn the history of Palestine, it becomes pretty infuriating pretty quickly as far as just how they've been edged out. And I remember even when, back when Barack Obama was president, I remember, for a while, Barack Obama, he was a little bit against Palestine being a state or it being, recognized, things like that. But then, when he finally reached a point where Israel was doing enough messed up stuff to him that he kind of like switched his tune. He's like, oh well, they actually need to stop messing with the Palestinians because he had a little bit of a conscience. But I was surprised at how quickly the message changed from supporters. So like the message was Palestine is never Barack Obama supporters, which I was back then. But like at first it was like completely on his side, like Palestine was never a state. Then all that talk immediately just switched once Barack Obama changed his view. But it's so interesting. These things come in tides. So any kind of little support that you can give as an individual in education, you're more than likely going to want to do something helpful after you educate yourself, about the history. But any little thing that you can do as far as education and all these supporting brands that do not support, Israel or
I
the
have to track down her username, but there is a Jewish content creator who has been educating about Christian Zionism and the problem of Christian Zionism in this whole debacle, and distinguishing between the three Israels that she went over, and debunking, the religious Israel from this current state of Israel. So I think that's also important to understand, because there are plenty of Jewish people out there educating about this. If you want that perspective, if you're more comfortable with that perspective than say jumping into a pro-Palestinian one, that's valid, so there's so many resources out there,
Yeah, I saw this interview and I can't remember what. So Turkey recently came out with their own English language kind of like news thing. But I remember this I believe it was a Jewish rabbi. I mean, he had all the usual ethnic like clothes on of a Jewish rabbi, and he was talking and he had this he had a Israeli flag with an X over it, and his point was on the channel. He's like he's saying that so basically the Israeli people shouldn't be equated to a state, and that you don't have to be proud. You can be proud of being Jewish and not be proud of what Israel is doing or Israel existing, in the way that it does as an aggressive state or as a state that is trying to take other people's land. You can support kind of everybody at once. There's no need to either be on one side or the other. You could be on everybody's side, just against aggression. And that was his main point about, fighting against nationalism and not being equated to nationalism and taking away from the religion, which I thought was a good point. But that should be a pretty easy video to find.
It's important to note, too, that most Zionists in the U.S. are evangelical Christians. They're not Jewish Americans, So, we have to wonder what the real agenda is there.
Yeah, and they say things like, we have to defend Israel because the Israelis are God's chosen people. And I always think that, so, I always go back to, my whole spiritual thing, like, why would God create all people, a God create all people and then have a chosen people? So it doesn't really make sense. But then it's very much labeling and propaganda, religious propaganda that is strangely ethnic combined with religion. It gets really muddy and it doesn't really make any sense. But what it does end up doing is it ends in violence and it ends in kind of desensitization towards the pain of the Palestinian people or any other people. When you have something like this in regards to religion and nationality and ethnicity all wrapped into one. But yeah, do we have anything else that we kind of want to mention before we kind of end it here?
I guess I just want to remind any of those, should they see this, any of these witchy content creators, any of these spiritual new agey motherfuckers that want to preach healing and bringing enlightenment, going into the fifth dimension or whatever the fuck they're claiming. We cannot do that if you are on the wrong side of history. So please get the fuck up. And to anybody who is just anxious and just learning about this and just new to this or wondering what is relevant to them, I encourage you to look at the links I will be sharing, and I'll probably add to this over time because there's just so much information. But please take the time to look at it. If you're able to talk to someone who is Palestinian, listen to their voice, listen to what they have to say. I would definitely recommend Jewish Voices for Peace being a good resource for those of you who are worried about anti-Semitism and all this. That's a valid concern, So just don't be afraid to look into it. Don't be afraid to act because this does affect our global community. I'm hoping it will turn out for the better. I do have some hope that the global community wants better for the whole world, including Palestine. So let's all get on the same page with that.
That makes sense to me, and I will second that as well. But yeah, it was good talking to you. I hope that we can get together on this again soon. We'll keep on talking after we, stop recording. But yeah, anybody who is on my channel, would you like to mention your channel?
Sure, yeah. So you can welcome to join me on Sanctuary Satanica. I'm going to be dedicating pretty much every video from now on, like, to this fight and be adding links to it in some way, or at least put it on my link tree. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Hunter, for having me and for letting me have you on my channel. So yeah, you feel free to plug yours. I'm of course going to link your channel in my description. So feel free to check out Hunter's channel if you're not familiar with his work. So yeah.
Yeah, and you can just type in Hunter Salazar on YouTube, and you can find me. You can also find me on Google pretty easily. But yeah, thank you all very much for joining us, and we will see all of you on our channels in the future.